voice of your new police state.
Welcome to the Charles Carroll Society. I am your host, the self-appointed bard of the American Readout. We have an excellent show for you today. What we'll be talking about today is an audio interview from South Africa that was sent to me from South Africa. The person speaking is Frans Cronje, and the organization that he is associated with is the South African IRR. I believe that stands for the Institute of Race Relations in South Africa. It's a very old organization. If you read about it, it appears to have been in existence for over 90 years. And they basically are a classic liberal organization that supports freedom of speech and property rights. Let me read you something from their blog, irr.org.za. And it says, in our office hangs a mural that reads, we stand for classic liberalism, an effective way to defeat poverty and tyranny through a system of limited government, a market economy, private enterprise, freedom of speech, individual liberty, property rights, and the rule of law. So I listened to the entire incredible interview this guy gave. It's more like a speech. It's him, Cronje, speaking. And it's very long and probably too long for the YouTube video format. So what I will be doing is publishing the entire speech by this guy from the Institute of Race Relations from South Africa on the podcast. Normally comes out on Wednesday or the weekend. So I'll be doing the whole one. And I really recommend for you who want to sit through about 45 minutes to listen to it. However, in this format in YouTube, I'm going to try to cut out what I believe is some of the most important parts. But I will go, one of the things that are incredible about this Institute of Race Relations, like I said, it's an advocacy group. They're fighting against land export theft that South Africa's been putting in place from like I said, from a classic liberalism perspective. But one of the things that he does a great job in the overall speech is he talks the truth about how South Africa has come to where it's supposed to be, what it has done. And I believe that if South Africans and South Africa take the bait and make this whole thing about race, whites, genocide, white land is being taken, whites have to form their exclusive group, it is my opinion that they will lose. This guy from the Frans Cronje from this Institute of Race Relations, he makes the point that there are many people who are fighting corruption. There are many people who are stand to lose. Matter of fact, most South Africans stand to lose if they let the looters and the leftists destroy their country, which they are. And he does a very good job in explaining the whole thing. And like I said, if you go over to my website, you can see the links to the iTunes store where you can download my podcast. And I'll be putting his entire speech up on the podcast for this week and sharing it with that audience in a longer format. So with that, let's look at Frans Cronje from the South African Institute of Race Relations.
What South Africa's farmers face today is therefore not about poverty or public pressure or even land itself. They have been swept up in a far deeper political and ideological conflict, the battle of ideas over whether South Africa will survive as a free, modern and open society, or whether it will sink into a socialist and later communist morass of poverty, oppression and state control. It is no exaggeration to say that what we face today is a battle for the very survival of the Judeo-Christian ethic in southern Africa. And what farmers face and what will happen to them is very much the litmus test of who will win that battle, meaning that given what is at stake, that in many respects all South Africans are commercial farmers today. For the time being, however, farmers will remain very much on the sharp end of that battle, given the extent to which a decade of virtually unchallenged, hate-filled, racist rhetoric and propaganda and falsehood has been directed against them and what they represent, that they stole the land, that they abused their workers, that they refused to work towards a better South Africa. Have no doubt that the propaganda was intentional, to so stigmatize farmers that no one would dare to come to their defense when the government inevitably turned on them and used their case to erode property rights not just with respect to land, but across the economy. It was a terrible mistake, therefore, for the agricultural industry not to challenge the propaganda, just as it was a terrible mistake to dismiss the post-2007 policy pattern and the ideology that underpinned it. All were parallel and related processes designed to checkmate the industry into negotiating the terms of its own demise within frames of reference set by its ideological opponents, a process from which you can draw a direct line to Mr. Ramaphosa's announcements last week. As you break down the myths and the falsehoods, you realize that EWC is not about land at all, but about four other things. It is first an incompetent attempt to outmaneuver the EFF on land, but that has backfired spectacularly, with the EWC issue creating new and previously undreamed of political platforms for the EFF, such as their virtual chairing of the public land hearings, although we have ever more reason to believe that the two parties are working hand in glove towards their later reunification. The second is an attempt to extend as a general principle of law the idea of a regulatory or custodial taking, and thereby eroding property rights generally, something that can succeed minus a constitutional amendment. Land is just the thin end of the wedge, as the current NHI policy proposal reveals. The third is to try and unite the tripartite alliance. Unity is a greater policy priority for the ANC than reform, and to unite a political movement you need an enemy, and the years of mostly unchallenged political and media propaganda directed against commercial farmers has allowed the government to portray them today as an enemy of the people. The fourth is to open the way to the erosion of civil rights broadly, given the likely future threats to the ruling party's political hegemony, and given that property rights anchor human liberty in all free societies. Step by step, the components of a downward economic, social, and political spiral are assembled and set into motion. Whether these dangers can be countered and later reversed depends on one thing alone: the future trajectory of South Africa's battle of ideas. Battle of ideas theory, in which we are much practiced, holds that the winner of any public policy struggle will ultimately be the side that injects the greatest volume of compelling argument into the public domain. Hence, farmers' current predicament at the end of a decade of virtually unanswered public stigmatization.